Bill T. Jones. I'm Artistic Director of Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Company, and I'm also the Artistic Director of New York Live Arts.
I'm Janet Wong. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Company and also New York Live Arts.
I'm Awam Amkpa. I'm a professor at NYU Tisch School of the Arts, as well as in the Department of Social and Cultural Analysis. So I gotta say, words do not actually capture the magnitude of my gratitude for being here to talk to you about this.
Wonderful.
But it's really quite an honor, and there's so much written and talked about you. Like, if you just venture, I always said any PhD student doing research is in trouble, because if you just go on YouTube, there are like hundreds and hundreds of your sessions, for which each one stands for its own as well. But I'm going to be focusing on maybe three things. One would be, of course, the forthcoming show.
Analogy?
The trilogy, and the fact that it's a unique opportunity for the audiences at Skirball to, especially the one of them is premiering, I guess, for the first session.
The third
section,
one, Ambrose.
Yeah, and also I was talking to Jay a little bit earlier about the 6-hour format, which they just experienced with Forced Entertainment and so on. So I just wanted to talk a little bit, to hear you articulate a bit about that as a kind of a way of introducing the audiences to it. Because I think they need it much more in terms of, and then the other part I want to talk about are some of your processes, and for me, my interest as a scholar of the medium, I'd love to talk about. And the third one would be what we started with, Fela, because I felt some of the processes had a certain universal tenor to them. And one of the things people always go through is when, especially in relation to African performance art, is that people always thought that it's one-way traffic of either the diasporic community invoking Africa and or borrowing memories of things from Africa. But people they forget the recirculation of diasporic cultural practices and their impact on African performers.
Well, that's a rich menu, and we should dive in.
Yeah.
The thing I've been, for better or for worse, I am obsessing always about imagining this conversation and framing the conversation in the excitement we have about doing these three sections back to back and what people will think. If I have an audience that comes that is interested in Bill T. Jones as a social justice artist, that's one set of expectations. If we have one that sees Bill T. Jones, the wild child, improviser, naked, gay man, all of those, that's another one. But I would think it would be very important to say that I am very much a formalist. And then I'm in talking to my young nephew. My young nephew, who is the subject of the central this piece in the center, I'm constantly explaining to him the most basic language of my field, because he grew up in a world where he didn't really understand what his Uncle Bill, who he claims to love, was really about. So, form. And I was turning it over today, driving in. Does form mean the how of something? How space is used, how time is used, how gesture is used in performance. That's one thing. Form, and then what do we mean by content? The meaning of the thing. So many people, when they see the analogy, which is based around the personalities of three individuals, 2 oral histories and 1 quasi-fictitious character, is the piece all at the service of their stories? Moises Kaufman, great director of the Laramie Project, who I'm working with on another one, he came to see, I believe it was Dora, out at Montclair. Dora, the first section, Dora Tramontan, and he was very polite, and he said, but I know these stories because his father was a Holocaust survivor, and I thought, did you really think it was about me telling another Holocaust story? There are many more dramatic stories, many more hair-raising, gory stories. What? This is rather common, Dora. It was about the personality, that person, and then you have to understand each one of them. Lance's story, is it about an at-risk youth who falls down the rabbit hole of drug use, sexual abuse, and ends up an invalid? Yeah, but those stories are everywhere as well. And then Ambrose, is this about World War I? Is this about, is it a gay love story? What is it? Well, if you read Skirball's book, you understand that all of that's true, but there's something mesmerizing in the way in which it's made. So, Skirball informed my mind, and in a way, my heart, about how you can take disparate elements, investigations, and then the measure of the artist is the cleverness with which you employ formal means. So these three works, in some ways, this is a dangerous thing to say, or it's a formal exercise. At the service of what? Now we're chasing our tail. Is it the form or is it the content? At the service of some human story, some poetry. Why is it called analogy? What's being compared? On one level, I'm giving you a whole mouthful here. One level, it's about the way formal devices are deployed. And the intelligent viewer, and we love an intelligent viewer, is able to look at them, the three of them, and see how this choreographer, or these choreographers, have used and reused certain devices. And at the same token, are you listening to how the choreographer hears these stories? And where is the blues in it? Where is the uplift in it? Where are the intractable philosophical questions of why is the world so difficult? Why is it so fucked up? And what is beautiful? Over the holiday out in New Mexico with my art world friends, as time goes on, there's more of the O.J. Simpson effect. Maybe you don't know, but there was a time when we thought, those of us who came from the counterculture, we could talk about anything. You're white people, black people, we're not our bodies. But then we found something happened with O.J. We had to stop talking because it was too dangerous.
Right.
Because when they sat across the table from me, and I sat across the table from them, and it's something we're going through as well, there are things that are just, we like each other, we love each other, we can't talk around this. But remember one of the person who should have known better was challenged, said, well, what is your creed? Because this is a high art conversation. Art about art, right? And I said, well, art about art can be masturbatory. Hey, don't get me wrong, I like masturbation. But, they said, well, what is your creed? And I said, I'm interested in beauty and justice. Okay. That's the content of, on one level, of all my work. The analogy has one, I can't look anymore, I can't look directly at my creed. I'm almost being led by the form. How do I tell the story of a Jewish woman, French Jewish woman, who was 19 when the war started, and her memory is already beginning to leave her, and I love her. How can I just allow her story to speak, but it's got to speak through the devices that I have with my collaborator, Janet Wong, my nephew. This is the other black gay man in this huge tribe whose life has been really made a mess of. Who's at fault? That's a whole other question. And ultimately everything is white America's the reason for everything, or is the parents too much? More about how does he and I really talk? Is that what it's about? An intergenerational conversation. The third one, Skirball is a great artist. what is there that made me interested in his words? Those things, is the sexuality of the protagonist, this idea of a German manservant, a Jewish a young man who he's servicing. Susan Sontag says she thinks the whole book is a great accounting of destruction in the 20th century. How all of those things. So that's, once again, form and content chase each other in the analogy trilogy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And the sum of the parts I always find interesting as you're immersed in the making of it in the studio every day. You look at the things closely, but then at the end of the process, finally, when we see part 1, 2, and 3 back to back, last summer when we first got to see it? I was struck by all the things that were not said, but that are revealed, the choices we make. The choices that those people make, that we just lay the content out with no commentary. That's not our style, I guess, to comment on someone's choice or how it became this or that way. But somehow, by the end of the evening, by the end of the 3 evenings, we did it in 3 separate evenings, something else revealed itself to me, which I hope the audience will find, their own revelations.
I like the word revelations, but I also, for me, this describes the way I understand art, because I was trained firstly in Nigeria. I worked with the playwright Wole Soyinka, I was his assistant for many years. I still work with him.
And Fela's
cousin. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was struggling to articulate what you just said intellectually, and he couldn't. So he just started using his plays to actually articulate that. And training with him meant we had to get out of the classroom, go into traditional performances where you had to be, it's formalistic, really form, because you had to but to get into the form, you're kind of somewhat initiated into the way of being in the world by this community. And what happened there is that the best word to use for it is divination. Because the form is what divines the meaning. So the repetition and where the patterns, the structures, the rhythm and stuff. So the best way so for me, teaching art students at Tisch School of the Arts, it takes like a long time for the students to get it because they're overwhelmed by everyday life. They're overwhelmed, even so they create there's a separation between the techniques they're learning and how to deal with everyday life. They don't see the connections.
So a young African might not have that problem. Are these forms closer to the young African than they are to an NYU student?
Absolutely. For me, I joined NYU some 18 years ago now, where I had to learn how to communicate what you just said to students. I had to tell them about the ideas of rhythm, the ideas of structures, the ideas of revelations that comes through repetition and so on. And also the body being put in situations that are extraordinary in order to reveal a story.
Now I have to make a shameful confession that I have such great respect for time-honored forms, and do I dare say traditional societies? It's forms, not pejorative, is it? I'm a follower of John Cage, and it chants. So and the classic postmodern, I think you must know something about postmodern dance, was problem solving. Ask a question, now go look for a way to solve it. This isn't starting with there is a drum that has, we all recognize that this is, this means birth, this means death. We have so much freedom that we can make up our form. So when I am, the divination, can you, and here, look at me, I'm doing your job. Can I trust my form as a tool of divination, as those traditional forms? I don't know. I don't know.
I think so. I mean, I've seen your works both in live performance and on videos, and I think they do. For me, actually, when I first saw your work, I think it was somewhere in Northampton in Massachusetts. There was a show in one of the big halls there, and I kept thinking, oh my God, I just saw something similar to the kind of stories I would see in Africa.
I wonder what the piece was.
I can't remember now. I think
It's not so important.
Yeah,
but
it was
I'm
a while
glad.
ago. It was in the 90s.
So you weren't interested. You weren't
Yeah.
concerned about an arbitrary relationship of form to content, or the elements are often held together by indeterminate means.
Yeah, so the content resides in the form, and so there is a relationship between the spectator and the performer, and that relationship actually puts the audience in this way of discovery. They're captivated by the body telling stories in such fascinating ways, right? Very formal. So you begin to look for the form, for the story. That's why I call it divination, because it's like the product of the relationship between the performer and the spectator.
Now, thank you for the generosity of that. I want to encourage me to accept what the gentleman is saying, because what I was taught was, unless you can throw off any one meaning, you are trapped.
Yes.
Therefore, we were taught in this task-based culture of the modern or postmodern that it has to defeat meaning. Now, defeat meaning, like, for what purpose? Now that's where and John Cage, I don't quite, he would say that Happy New Year's. It's all about the new. It's all about discovering something you didn't know.
Right. But now, how do you reconcile this love for John Cage and postmodern strategies with the desire to tell a story, a narrative?
Yeah, you know what? That's why I'm so excited about the analogy. I don't know if I have been able to. My job is to make the problem, put it out there, craft it as well as possible with you, make it as handsome as possible, like a meal that was prepared. Now, was it a meal prepared by a person who was blindfolded and who didn't taste the food? In some ways, we've been taught that the piece with Annie, that I shouldn't mention that, this wonderful piece that's being informed by algorithms. Literally, that performers are singing what a computer is coming up with.
Right.
Did they taste it beforehand? Or they just put it out there and trust it? Now, the result is intriguing to me, but it would be very difficult for me to tell somebody why they want to watch this. Dora's story, this woman who it was the age of many of my when the story starts, she's the age of some of my dancers. I thought already that's interesting. Dora, this French Jewish woman, the persons we hear telling her stories sometimes are black people. Now maybe that's no longer of relevance. I don't know how the NYU community will feel about it, but I thought that's news, that we've now come to a point where the universal, this is back to Uncle Tom's Cabin era concerns, can a black voice in America have a universal ability, a universal vibration? And so that's what I thought part of the news was. People were going to be encountering their prejudices. They were going to have to fight against all their social conditioning. Now I'm not so sure. So I have a lot of questions myself. I know I enjoy it formally. I know I enjoy looking at it. Now, telling a story, do I want to break your heart in places? Yes, I do. You know?
And the story is really about storytelling. It's not non-linear. It is in many ways linear, and except for Skirball, who in his book is goes back and forth in time. But maybe the kind of postmodern strategies we impose on it, meaning when we tell a story, we're not creating a scene. Most of the time, you do not see one-on-one correlation between character and narrative and dance. We're not dancing, performing the scene for you.
We're not doing pantomime.
We're not doing, yes, that's
Although
what I'm
that's
saying.
not, we could, it could just be another, since we are purveyors of forms
Yeah.
and we throw them together and take them apart, we could.
Yeah.
There are times we say Marcel Marceau, and
Yeah.
our actor actually looks as if he is doing
Right.
Marcel Marceau. But it's just a moment we pass
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. And sometimes we go closer to seeing it, and sometimes we purposefully go far away from the storytelling.
But I want to come back to what you said earlier about revelation. When crafting the story, those moments of revelation, what did they feel like?
Well, when crafting the story,
You mean
No.
working on the text?
Like choreograph.
But then we really are thinking like playwrights, aren't we?
yeah,
We are.
Right.
you know.
because Bjorn Omeland, who's Bill's husband, and the son of Dora, who's also the set designer, spent one summer transcribing many hours of this oral history that was done in 2002?
I think.
Yeah.
I think done. The oral history was done for her son. You probably have read this.
Yes.
I was concerned that she was aging and she
Yeah.
was telling these stories
Yeah.
that I was going to make a gift to them of their mother going through what we thought was going to be every year of the war. But of course, it was never that linear. So what were you getting
What
at?
was I getting at? I said, well, delving into the transcript and trying to make sense
Yes.
of the thing that memory does. Do you remember this? And then she'll jump back and forth, and trying to make sense of that story was a huge task for us. And there were so many juicy anecdotes that we had to throw out because there wasn't enough time, and it always leads out in another window that doesn't help us towards the end, towards the goal, if there is such a thing. I can't tell what was being revealed when we were working intensely on it, but later on, looking at the story that we've told, makes me want to be a better person.
Well, and she goes to the heart of it. Although I would say also we were trying to, in your domain as a maker of theater, or what is good storytelling? What, from the work I've done in the commercial theater, and I know sitting with people around the writing table, what information does the audience need and when? If you want us to care about this person, who is she? Now, some of that is the way I ask the questions of Dora as an oral history. But then we did decide, her mother, her father, the death of her mother. There were many anecdotes, but which ones are going to, like, the breadcrumbs that would leave the audience with us?
Right.
So we were trying to, in some ways, use a classic technique of telling a linear story. Now that's how we start. A piece like Lance, it was very difficult to get my nephew to be linear. And he had, for whatever way his brain works, it's very difficult for him to just report simply what happens. Therefore, he would say things that would fragment, and we would, I think he means this. And let's take all this page of words and make it into a sentence. And now, where is it going? It's nightmare after nightmare, some of the funny, and then, okay, well, what's the point of it? Is he completely dysfunctional? Okay, Janet and Adrian, who is our dramaturg, I don't want him to be a train wreck. He has dreams. So find them. Going through pages of him talking, double talking. Oh, he wants to make this piece for LGBT, his own piece for LGBT youth. All right, oh, that's a place we could get to. We want to get to him actually still trying to achieve something, literally a conversation where, and I don't know, we didn't make this up, did we? And I say to him, I want to make a piece about a man who's saving his life through art. And he says, yes, and me too, So I literally spoon-fed him a solution. So we were trying to make sense of it, emotional sense of it. Skirball, we almost work the other way. We tell a story as much as we can as narrative, and then we wanted it to evaporate. We wanted the story to evaporate, and when the story evaporates, the singing, the dancing, the physicality comes to the fore, and it ends in that way. Yes.
I mean, I'm fascinated by it because for me, it's what you're all doing. Actually, is really, I feel there's a generational thing with especially training younger people. Because I was curious to know what your nephew's age was, because the culture or the process by which they acquire information and express themselves, I seem to be seeing differences because they're heavily influenced by television and telling stories in episodes and stuff like that. We're having difficulty understanding linear structures and so on. It's almost like they're thinking in an algorithm. And the story can start anywhere,
Right.
and it's almost like what happens with video games, really. But I'm fascinated by that. It's a cultural shift that's almost getting universal because almost every country you go to, you find young people, they're computer literate, but they don't understand the literacy with which all the forms of stories were written.
Well, once again, you're being very generous, and also you're instructive, because my nephew, when I started this, was in his 40s. But he had the emotional development, I think, of a 17, 18-year-old, because maybe it was something about who he is, but drug use at a very early age. And a life that was not really, he's an intelligent man, but a life that was not about honing his ability to think. And that is something he wants to catch up on now. How to read a paragraph. Now, what did you read? And he oftentimes cannot play that back. Now, is that a brain problem, or is that, you generously say it's a generational situation, which may be in fact operating, but what does one do with that? Then it becomes about his Uncle Bill using this information to make Uncle Bill's work.
Right.
Which has its own moral ramifications and all, but it's also, what else can I do? You know, it's about my work.
You know, when we were making Lands, part 2, the conversation between uncle and nephew he was in the hospital bed the whole time. He was fighting for his life, literally. Now he's okay, he has survived. But we premiered the piece in 2016. We were thinking, we hope he lived till the work premieres at least. And he did. And
See, he was not if I can use this term, a normal person. And he doesn't like to, I even challenged him, because when I wanted him to be disciplined, I said, are you a special case? No, I'm not a special case. But as time goes on, I realize, my brother, you are a special case. You literally have to learn how to read. You have to literally learn how to encounter a word and then go look it up. So
and you forced him. You
still doing.
Listening to some of the recordings, Bill would record all the phone conversations and would transcribe them, and I listened sometimes and go, oh my God, Bill, stop pushing. He's in the hospital, and they're talking hospice. He's literally dying, and Bill's pushing him. Have you written that song down?
Yes.
Literally. And I thought by the time we premiered the piece, maybe making this work saved his life.
He says he wanted to do that.
He wanted to do that, but literally he has something to look forward to, and there was a song that was written from his hospital.
Literally, the night before he went into surgery, where they told us that he might have a 50% chance of living. I said, I know this is what an artist does. Right now, what is it like? Right now, can you really, rather than dream about the future or agonize about the past, where are you? And he wrote something called This Is My Life. And we sent it to him the day he was going into surgery, But on this question of this, because, I'm looking at your kind face, and I feel like I'm always in some sort of courtroom against myself. I am. And I'm thinking, well, when a person is that ill, should you expect them to produce? First, if they tell you that they are able to do that and that they want to do that, yes. But I think Arnie Zane, I know that there's a piece that when we did an evening for Arnie Zane last year, or last spring, right?
Last spring. Yeah.
And this piece, he literally was making this piece from his bed at home. And this is where I got the idea from Arnie. Literally, so unwell, but he had Janet Lilly on the side, and he'd tell her, "Try this movement, try that," in bed, you know, and throwing what he was a maker.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the standard for me.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
you know, you can. Some people can do it.
Right, and I think it's still part of that whole framework of divinations, because when people, it's not when people go to the church, you know, it's not so, the form of the presentation is what makes people discover different aspects of their humanity, and I think part of that.
Now, you're speaking the makers or the audience?
Both. But well, first the audience actually, but I'll talk about makers. But for the maker, it's also the form. Really, that's why I don't usually, because sometimes form and content is such a false divide.
I know.
Because what constitutes the form is really part of the content, and the form takes you into an extraordinary space of using language through bodies, through performance, and so on. And I keep thinking about what it does for the person performing, but also what it does for the person watching.
The form.
The form.
Right.
Because that's where I believe strongly in what you said, the examples you gave. I believe strongly in when they were doing it, they were also divining the limits of their own humanity. They're looking even beyond it. They may even be in that twilight zone. Well, it's so healing. It's just it's like peeling off so many.
Healing, is it?
Yeah, very
My
healing.
challenge to my nephew, write it down,
Yeah,
nephew,
absolutely.
write it down.
Absolutely.
It's a brutal, when
Yeah.
you say it was brutal, but you know,
Yeah.
I thought that art making was
Absolutely.
brutal.
Yeah.
And I think
It can be everything
Yeah.
you want to be, but
Yeah.
I thought there are times when it should literally be terrifying. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now, is that a
Yeah.
romantic notion?
no,
about it?
and I think it was important. Like I said, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that saved his life. That kept him alive.
Absolutely.
And I felt like I was eavesdropping. So I'm listening to the two
Personal.
fight
Right.
is very, very personal.
Yeah.
Right.
And the ritual of uncle and nephew talking to one another is
Right.
important. Something to
Right.
look forward to.
Right.
And then you held him accountable because
Right.
we called him Bill calls him the escape artist as part of
Yes.
the title.
And
But
he
that
did-
moment,
yeah.
though, between you and him, it's an amazing moment, right? That
Yes.
moment of you provoking, prodding, seeking this, and so on, and his response, and even going beyond his response to you, to touching something else. That moment is so significant
Yes.
in everyone's. I've seen so many artists do that, and that's why I keep using the word divination, because it does have a kind of a spiritual dimension to it.
Oh,
because
very
you're
much.
touching,
Yeah.
you're going beyond the limits of the material of into the realms of something else that even language fails you.
See, Janet, I would say that this is very interesting. See, I think I can imagine in a parallel universe, he has embraced ever more the fact that he's a Christian and that he has God. And could God have saved his life? I think, and nephew, if you ever hear this tape, I think that it is a shortcut. But it's not for me to say. So you can always say, "I'm in the hand of God, Uncle." I don't. And if I'll get well or not, I said, "No, you are an artist. You're in your own hands. Your legacy. What do you want to leave? You know, all those words, which is, I guess, legacy
Right.
is ego-driven,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's being,
Yeah.
But he could have said, "My religion, my God," but he allowed me to say, "You say you're an artist. You want to be in this club?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm your life coach. I'm going to say, even if you are literally dying and you're able to, you have to
Yeah.
strive." Well, he obviously let me do that, and he's still alive, and the work is being shown this weekend.
Wow. Well, you know, I saw one of your tapes. You were talking about. I think it's in Chicago. You talked. Somebody was asking you. I think the questioner was focusing on your vocal inflections and kept saying you sounded like a dad, or you sounded like
like a what?
Like her dad, or like her pastor.
Oh,
Hey, this was in Chicago Humanities, and she was, and I was fascinated by your response.
Humanities Festival, wasn't it?
Yes. And you said something like, you had the infrastructure
About Southern
without the
Baptist.
faith.
Yes.
And I was thinking about that. That was really a very eloquent summation, actually. But even those people who claimed they have the faith, they actually have the infrastructure, and the faith is that elusive thing they're searching for. So, but you just said, when you said you have the infrastructure, I thought they would just say, yes, that's all we have. We're always looking for faith through the replay and remaking of that infrastructure. Because I see that in religious events, that even the preacher is looking for faith through the infrastructure of performance. You know, and I think you just put it out there that that's what I do. I have it.
And this is what makes me an African American.
Right.
I will use John Cage was Irish American. Right. You can look at the people. They use their ethnicity, their background. There's a language that you get with that. You know. And I embrace that. I say that my mother's voice, my mother's praying, taught me something about public expression. You know. Now, my mother's voice, of course, was formed in the black church, in a black community. My voice, other than our home, was formed in middle-class white and the white avant-garde. And so I was always doing this thing which I thought half the people in the room didn't understand what I'm doing, you know? How did the writer from the New Yorker, who I never like to say her name, but she was saying, and he always works himself into a tizzy. Literally, quote. He works himself into a tizzy. You know,
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Does she understand anything about the African American prophetic tradition? You know, and could she see the infrastructure that has informed me and make room for it as an aesthetic strategy?
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah. No, and I kept thinking about it. It kept interrupting my thinking when I was thinking about coming to talk to you about this infrastructure and faith. And even as you were given the example of your nephew or Annie, I could see that what happens, say, when the performer is kind of invoking all elements of the infrastructure to touch faith. You know, and I think that's the healing part of performance.
I think it's probably relevant right now to talk about things that spun out. For instance, my nephew, his infrastructure is informed, yes, by the church. But when he was a child growing up, his father was growing pot in the yard. His father was a drug addict. My sister was involved for reasons I don't want to go into with this man. And my nephew's ideas were shaped by television, pop music. So when he tries to draw on those things, and he says, I'm a songwriter. Okay, well, what are the songs? The songs sound like things you hear on the radio, rhythm and blues. I said, okay, that's what it is. Bring it out. Bring it out. Let's not try to make you Duke Ellington or Arnold Schoenberg or anybody like that. So that, and therefore, musical choices in the pieces were informed by the, if you will, the infrastructure. I think infrastructure and memory play the same thing.
Of course.
When in the first section with Dora, why are we singing Parle-moi l'amour? Because when she was a young girl, that was one of the songs that moved her in France. Now why is there Schubert music? Well, that's the creators. Quote, Schubert has a meaning, and the songs move the creator, Bill T. Jones, so that and her memory of pop music in her era back in the 1920s, 30s, informs the music there. Let's not forget the composer,
Nick Hallett.
Nick Hallett. He has his own taste. My nephew, rhythm and blues, club dancing, gay culture, all those things, when I can get it out of him, how do you hear this? That's why I wanted him to write his songs. That mixes with his uncle and Nick Hallett and Janet Wong, and because you actually also inflect. And then Sebald was, in a way, in terms of music, Sebald was
Well, yeah. Well, Nick Hallett would probably tell you, our composer would tell you, that's the part 3 is when Schubert culminates and becomes and comes forth, and actually he wrote Nick, wrote a whole song cycle, I guess, in response to the text, but also in response to this revelation again of Schubert. Schubert has been through all 3 pieces.
Right. So one other thing I notice is how you retell stories. Ideas and stories.
in this piece, analogy or in general?
In general.
Retell.
Because I always felt it's not so much about telling a story, but you also retell stories.
Yes.
And you bring unusual stories together.
Could you give me an example?
I'm just thinking of most of your shows, including this one, that if you look at, say, the 3 parts, right, you almost think that instinctively people say, why are they together? Right, but it makes sense together. So and I see that in other works you've done as well, where even stories that people are familiar with becomes unfamiliar because of the way you tell it. And that retelling for me is really interesting way of getting the spectator involved in the piece.
Well, thank you again. I thought that what I was taught, that's awkward. I'm a real student of art practice, modernist art practice. I have my husband companion is an artist, and I watch him make marks, and I watch him find repetition in music. I have loved the work of Jasper Johns. I have been interested in how artists can do. What do you mean? This is a series you've made. What is a triptych? What is a diptych? Well, I'm looking at these two abstract. Klein, Franz Klein. Franz Klein. Okay, they go together, but what do I see? The colors go together. So I began to try to think about what you call the story. I think we mean the same thing. Is what does repetition do? Reading Proust back in the 70s when I should have been, handing out towels and doing massage at the Jewish Community Center, I'm reading Le Recherche, right? And why is he repeating this idea about Madame Guillemot, or what? Why is this coming back now? Oh, I see. He has the instance in mind a cathedral, and this anecdote and this one are like rooms in a cathedral, and now I get it. And now he has to repeat this because this is the lattice work or the buttresses. That's what I thought. Oh, that's what the big boys do. Big boys and girls do. Repetition is structure. And now John Cage says, no, blow it all up. You should not be doing architecture. You should be doing something else, which was important as well to hear. John Cage is really scary because he takes away everything like that about what good composition is. And he says good composition is, well, the more an artist gets out of his work, the more room there is for others to get into it. And he said taste is the enemy. Get past your taste. Then where am I if I get past my taste? So I have had to pull and push with my notion of modernism, New York School. And it's something, Estella's voice, looking for God, what you call the divination. I can say I'm crazy and I'm not a nice person sometimes, but I still believe in revelation. And I still believe the heart can open up unexpectedly, and I still believe that there is a mystery that is all of our legacy. we can all share in it.
There's something I think, because I think about this all the time. It's about the process of fragmentation. You know that what happens when when you're talking about taste, or even values, and how, first of all, in order to understand those values or even those moral codes, one has to understand it properly so that one can properly fragment it and then put it back together. So you find
I feel there's a recrimination in that.
No, it's good.
You know,
it's good.
Before you can break the rules, you must understand the rules.
Yeah, well, no, you should. It's more efficient when one understands what one wants to change. So what happens is that fragmentation and reassemblage becomes almost like a muscle that you find in when artists are...
Bravo, that's a wonder, like a muscle.
Right.
Well, you know, I'm going through this conversation. I hope that we're giving it to what you, because it's where I live right now.
Yeah.
I got a message the other day from a woman who happened to have been my girlfriend one summer when I was 18 years old and working for a summer work program with teenage. They were my age. I was not, but she and I had a relationship. And she wrote to me the other day saying, NPR has done the 100 most important novels. And she was so glad to see that another country was on there and that I was the one that they had interviewed to bring Jane Baldwin's Another Country.
Right.
And I thought, well, I wanted to do Skirball, but they insisted that since I'm the black gay writer, I should do, okay, good.
Right.
And I love the novel.
Right.
But what it made me feel when she was saying, I said, well, you know, you compliment me on that, but you realize it's really, it's at odds with my youthful jingoism about turn on, tune in, drop out, or all you need is love. And she said, well, I don't know where you're getting that from. Well, my parents, you know, at that time, we were dealing with prison reform and inequality and da-da-da. And I thought, well, I was a callow youth. Yes, what I had was the knowledge that a black American has. I had that. But did I have it in the way that now we understand it? What it means, the prison industrial complex, what equity is, the whole question of Me Too with women and so on. Did I have that? She credits me with having been at the level of Baldwin. At that time, I wanted to be wild like the white kids. I wanted to go to Woodstock. I wanted to say, you're not this body. Don't let anybody tell you that you are your black body. You are free. Eastern religion, all of those things. So I didn't learn the structure really. Not as well. I went to university, but I was barely paying attention. You know.
Is that an unconscious thing, maybe? Because Bill likes to talk about Bill and Arnie's work. People would comment on it back then, even that they are rebelling against the patriarchal society with their gay dance, you know. And meanwhile, Bill said, "We're just trying to be fierce."
Yeah, right. And the counterculture had told us, no one can tell you who you are.
Right.
No one can tell you how you use your body. No one, and just go do. Go do, dear. Be free. Now, unconscious, we in just expressing who we were already positing a question against the society.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that breaks things. So it does.
You can hide, right? But you put it on stage. You can go hide your relationship, but
Yeah.
you put it on stage. You performed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were interested in in structuralism, formalism.
Right.
You know, for all these kind of pretentious reasons, you know, but we were interested in it, and independent film. We were like making it all work together, and somehow out of it, an artistic sensibility grows.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I don't envy your job, having teaching a university of people who feel that they don't have to know anything.
Right.
Which is what we felt.
Right. Right.
We don't have to know.
Yeah.
We just do.
Yeah. Well, it's both exciting and scary. Exciting in the sense that I go to class every day. I'm teaching a course now called Theaters of the Black Atlantic, and the whole principle is that it's a counterculture to what we'll know as European modernism. And I remember the last class, one of the kids, a black kid, going through her own identity issues now, said to me, we spent the first 2 weeks looking at European modernity and modernisms. When are we going to talk about the Africans? So we're getting there, but
I can see where she's going.
Yeah. So I could
Why
see
do you feel this has got to be the foundation?
Exactly.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was really, and I kept thinking, but how can I teach them it's a counterculture if they don't understand
What the culture
is?
is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there was this impatience, which on one hand I admired, but as the professor who
So
was
what do you
finished,
do? How do you pull them
yeah,
down?
I was thinking
without,
I need to teach my class.
without oppressing them.
Yeah,
without
exactly.
not hearing their voices.
Exactly,
At all.
and
Yeah.
that's the part that I was excited that I have a job I can do this at, but at the same time I was frustrated. It just took me off my game, and but I took time out and said, all right, let's take a break now, and then we came back, we moved forward. But that's a kind of constant that you find. I mean, I spent like almost a semester fixating on what rhythm means to students training to be performers, and it's so abstract.
Yes.
And I say vibrations, or when I say text is not stable, it vibrates. But then when they do, their enthusiasm blows everyone off.
Wow.
And
Well, when they do,
when they get it, they just go crazy. They really good crazy. But I also will show them your works and other, and I think I know talking about your work is different from the way people see your work.
Yes.
And I think we're lucky that you keep producing. Because sometimes people would have just stopped producing and focus on the legacy of what they've done up to a moment. But what I keep seeing is how your work keeps opening up, keeps even fragmenting some of the basic of what you had done before.
Well,
And then putting them back together in a different form.
I don't know how you can appreciate how much I appreciate hearing what you're thinking, because I'm in the grip of middle-age doubt. I've been living in it probably for most of the time that we've been working together. Because when you're young, it's just doing.
Right.
And it just
Right.
comes out of you. Then you have successes, you get some criticism, and you start, this doubt sets in. What keeps you going forward? Now, that is its own thing, particularly in a world where there's a thing called the business of art. You know, and people want your success, they want you to reproduce it. And then there is this question of why make a new work? Why? What are you doing this for? Is it habit? You know, what keeps going? And that is, now that's mysterious. Why make the next work? I have tried not to. I went to Lincoln Center the other night. Now Wynton Marsalis and I are having a new friendship. I would dare say that Wynton doesn't believe there's such a thing as progress in art. It was kind of shocking that he believes that you have found a classic form. It's a big band form. There are giants in it. There are rules. Now make work makes work. And I kept saying to him, does he think about blowing up the cathedral ever? Now, I don't, to my mind, he doesn't. And to hear him talk about it, he doesn't. I don't think that he is so interested in the quote new. I don't think he thinks he's making a classical art form.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And I called Bjorn the other night after seeing his concert and hearing of PPD afterwards. Wonderfully, everything is accomplished. He's first-rate mind. Except I thought, oh my God, I think this is not what I believe in art. And when I start talking about what I believe about the new, he looked at me, you poor naive thing. Don't you know everything's been done? Don't you know that there is that's just the emperor's new clothes? Look at this place. What we're doing, New York Live Arts. You know, what is it? What are the best and the brightest at age 23, 4, 5, and 6 believing right now?
Right.
Do we still believe you can incubate? Are we trying to incubate new ideas?
Ideas.
Yeah.
Ideas.
Yeah.
Well, and the analogy Trilogy is a artist in mid-career making his best effort to move forward for himself, for his partner, and for his company. Is it, it gets kind of scary when you're out there against somebody who effortlessly at age 25, 26, those young women we saw out at this chocolate factory, that piece that was, that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like Verdi hearing Wagner. You know that story? How it made him go into a depression?
Yeah.
Because he thought that he could not, this guy was doing this thing that he felt that he had missed the boat and he should just retire. I don't think he did. Didn't he go on writing a book or something?
Yeah.
But he was depressed when he saw this young Turk come along.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk, I've heard that, especially in your collaboration or relationship with Asadas, the whole idea is almost like what happens when some people want to kind of keep stasis, and then somebody wants to move it. Move it.
Well, he says it's a brave torch. He says we cannot drop this torch. They laid this. He says I'm the custodian. These cats made me the custodian of this form. You know?
Right.
So he has a responsibility.
To hold on to. Yeah.
And I say, but isn't the responsibility in jazz is supposed to be constantly blowing things up and
Exactly.
moving forward?
Right.
There are other people doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
Well,
It's a new variation, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think so strongly about it because it relates to the next question I have for you, which relates to Fela as well. Because here was a guy who trained as a classical composer at Trinity School of Music. And then he went through this crisis where he felt high life music or dance music and so on. He had to come to the United States to discover soul music, the Black Panthers, and so on.
Sandra Zador.
Yeah,
Right.
before the whole idea of Afrobeat became coherent.
And also, didn't his mother say, Fela, make the music of your people that people can understand?
Yes.
Make it so the market women can understand.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
that was like a road to Damascus kind of
It
moment.
was.
you know? And
It was.
have I had one?
I
I want the angel to come and I want to fall down in the dirt and say, I see the light now.
Yeah.
I mean, she does that for me regularly. You know, when she tells me to have heart, excuse me,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
we
what?
have 5 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I bring it up because I brought it up because I think I'm just thinking because again in my head speaking African languages and English, it's like rapid translation of ideas. Well, you do that when the dance is the language and you are translating ideas for the spectators and so on. But one of the things that about when people want to hold on to stuff, there's an African saying that what you hold on to too tightly is not good for your hands. Right, so you got to open it a little bit so you can hold it better. So what happens there is what happened to Fela and what your production did, because.
Well, what do you think? Fela held on too tightly to something?
No, Fela actually taught my generation, growing up in the 80s in Nigeria, he taught my generation that tradition can be tyrannical. So understand it only so you can expand it.
Now, tradition, and this is where it gets the DDA-FUCA, when we did we were doing anniversaries of pieces, bringing them back, and he said, you know, why are you doing repertory? You know, he said, I said the same thing to Merce Cunningham. He said, why are you still making dances like Merce Cunningham? This is an impresario who used to be in Crete outside of Paris, and it was almost like, you know, we were trying. I thought that mature style. So is mature style the same thing as tradition, and is it also this? And that's what depressed me the other night as we work to codify our style, the way we move. We want to, Will Deep Blue Sea, which is the next work, be a radical departure on the movement level, on the conceptual level. What will be radical in it is that Bill T. Jones's aged body will be back out on the stage again, doing what he does with young dancers. Now, I think from what people tell me that they find that intriguing to see me with people who could be my grandchildren. You know, I never wanted to be there. So this is a question.
Yeah.
I understand we can say it about tradition,
Yeah.
but in artists, we've been taught that Tissin, all of these people had late styles, and now they're applauded for their mature style.
Right.
But when you're there doing that,
Right.
and the young Turks are saying, I know they did it to Matisse,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, he's lost it.
Yeah.
You know, he was something back in 1920 and earlier, but here it is 1940, and what's he doing? You know, it's decadent, it's what have you. I think I feel that sometime from my community, and being here in this position as artistic director, you know, can they see me as part of the community? You know? And that's because when our dear friend Sam Miller, an impresario, very important, passed away, and there was a memorial for him this weekend. And the list of people who volunteered their time to be there, of course, we were on it. And I feel kind of we, that everyone kept saying in emails today, that I'm seeing how people talk, we. I think, why? Is there a we? Because I asked that question downstairs here about 6 years ago when the merger between Dance to the Workshop and Bill T. Jones, Arnie Zane Company happened. I said, what is the we? Because everyone kept saying, oh, the downtown community, as if we were all of a piece. And that is actually, to be accepted into it, is almost its own code of honor. And I still don't understand the answer. I don't know if I like to have the respect and love of my colleagues, but who are my colleagues? You know,
But late style is in fact lots of there's a famous book by Edward Said printed, published posthumously, because when he was dying, he started working on a few. He was fixated with Beethoven and a few.
Really?
Yeah,
The end of his life?
Yeah. He was fixated by that. Beethoven went through this moment of late style, and what he defined as late style is when artists work to a certain level of maturity where they begin to fragment all those canons.
The grosser few.
Yeah. And they do it audaciously. They do it.
Yes.
You keep thinking, what's wrong with them? They're breaking down everything that we built schools on.
Yes.
You know, and so and that late style becomes. It's almost like that. Once on one hand you're scared, but on the other hand, it's like, what are they going to do? You know, this is me boldly contesting all the stuff that I've built all these years, and I'm looking for another direction, and so on.
This is almost the opposite of
Yeah.
live fast, die young, isn't it?
Right.
May you live old and go through the doldrums and come out on the other side.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. May you live long to be able to let the grip.
Relax the grip.
Yeah.
You're going to make a list of that. You got to relax the grip.
Relax the
That
grip.
really, because it takes a lot
Right.
to just say, okay, let it go, and yeah.
That's different from what you were saying about the tyranny of tradition.
Right, because the tradition can make it's so comforting, it's so reassuring, and then
Particularly if you've mastered it.
yes,
Right.
If
yes,
you never mastered it, like you're trying to get your young students, and like I never did when I was their age,
right,
then it's another story. But
Right.
if you have mastered it,
Yeah.
you know,
yeah. Then it becomes this it almost makes the older person a stronger radical than the younger person.